and very happy to host this event this evening. Know Your Forest Types with Rod Denning. Really glad to see such interest in trees and forests. I know a lot of you, and I know that you're kind of tree people like I am. Trees are very fascinating aspect of nature. So glad to see you here. Uh, just a reminder that down below you can mute or unmute. You can be on camera or off camera. And we would like you to stay muted during the presentation, and then we're going to take questions and answers after. And probably we'll be taking them by chat because we do have quite a few people. So hope that works for you. West Michigan Environmental Action Council is based in Grand Rapids, been there since 1968, and a wonderful organization that I just started working for this year, even though I know them going back to 1989, because that's about how long I've been involved in environmental matters. And you can find out more about them at WMEAC.org. And I would encourage you to check them out and stay involved with us, because I am helping them expand in Muskegon County and along the lake shore, their programs. So very, very honored and very excited to be working for them. Would like to introduce John McFadden. John actually was involved in a couple of virtual book chats that I put on earlier this year, and he became very fascinated with trees and has started a tree group, and that's why I'm helping him, and we're hosting this meeting tonight. So, John, did you want to say a few words about your tree group and what you're doing with that?
Sure. As Tanya mentioned, she had a book chat series, and my wife Barbara and I attended, and it started with the title, The Future We Choose, Surviving the Climate Crisis, written by the architects of the 2015 Paris Agreement. And it really was an eye-opener for me and for my wife, and motivated us to consider ways to seriously address the reality that climate change threatens our very existence. So, since our greatest allies to combat greenhouse gases are the trees and the forests around us, I've been working with several other tree lovers to establish a new group called Planting Muskegon's Future, West Michigan Chapter. We launched a Facebook page by that same name during the summer, as many of us have joined another book chat titled The Hidden Life of Trees. It's a very good book I'd highly recommend. And not only did we learn much about how connected the trees are to one another, but how connected we are to the trees and how essential they are for our own well-being. And we've been having some fun on Facebook with surveys and pictures of our favorite trees, the nature trails we love to walk, the photos of our favorite fall colors. So please check it out and like our page. Now, since the COVID pandemic has prevented us from conducting large group gatherings, we chose to focus on bringing back our natural love of trees through our Facebook page and looking for internet speakers. And of course, thanks to Tanya, we are grateful to have Rod Denning as our speaker today. And before I pass his introduction on to her, I want to mention that a small group of us met on Sunday for our very first tree planting, a dozen young trees provided by the Arbor Day Foundation. And it was a small step in addressing a big challenge, but it was a forward step nevertheless. So that's my introduction, and let's learn more about local forest types. And Tanya will introduce Rod.
Okay, and I will introduce Rod. Keep in mind too that we will have question and answer after Rod gives his presentation. Probably best for him to do it without having questions through there, because just from our experience, that means we will be here probably longer than everybody wants to be. Also, when Rod is done, I will talk a little bit more about other opportunities to learn more about trees, other opportunities to learn more about climate change, and I'm working on a whole host of educational opportunities beginning in January, and we'll want to make sure that you stay tuned to that. Okay. So Rod, actually, I know Rod from a long time ago when he was at the Ennis Water Resources Institute. He is now the district forester for the Oceana, Newaygo, and Muskegon conservation districts. If you're not familiar with conservation districts, they are local conservation organizations that are very important to our communities. He has a BS in forestry from Michigan State University and MA in geography from Western Michigan. And he is retired from Grand Valley State University, the Ennis Water Resources Institute. And he's one of 20 district foresters across the state, and they work for the Michigan Forestry Assistance through the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. And his service area includes Oceana, Newaygo, and Muskegon counties. And his home office is in the Oceana Conservation District in Shelby. And he has put together a presentation about forest types in West Michigan. And I had a chance to take a look at it this afternoon. And I think that you're going to find it very interesting. So Rod, are you ready
Okay.
to say hello and start sharing your presentation?
Yeah, let me get my screen shared here. Everybody see it?
They're all muted, Rod. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. Okay, hello, everyone. Tanya went through the introduction very nicely, and tonight I'd like to kind of just touch on these different items here. Hold on a minute, let me turn on my laser pointer. I'm going to talk just a little bit about the Michigan Forestry Assistance Program, and we'll get into our main focus will be talking about the forest types, and we'll talk a little bit about the forests of the past, forests of today, and if we have time, a little bit about forest health issues. As Tanya mentioned, that I worked with the Forestry Assistance Program, hosted out of the Oceana Conservation District, and I serve 3 different counties, Muskegon, Newaygo, Oceana. And there's about 20 of us across the state that service mostly the forested population of the state. And if we have some forest landowners listening tonight, feel free to call me, and as part of my forest assistance program, I can help you with a variety of things. Some of them are listed here. We do site visits, and we can talk about your management options on your forests, and talk about forest health issues and different programs that are available, and provide presentations and provide professional contacts for having timber sales done and things like that. So feel free to contact me if you have those type of needs. So to start tonight, we'll talk about, wouldn't it be interesting if we could see the forest as it was prior to widespread European development? And there happens to be just such a data set that's available to explore that. Now, it was developed, the original data that was collected started out with the General Land Office surveys that were done across the Western territorial lands in the United States. Began in 1785. Michigan was surveyed in this 40-year period here. And the survey started before Michigan was a state, and then it continued on afterwards. But the GLO surveys were done to identify different land so they could start to sell land to private individuals. And that it started the beginning of, probably many of you are aware of, the public land survey system, our township and range section grid that was established. The baselines were originally laid out across the state, and the meridian line were laid out across the state. And surveyors then started breaking the state's lands up into 36-mile sections, or 36 miles townships, called congressional townships. Some of them are similar to your political townships. And for every one of these townships that they made, they also divided it up into 36 sections. So that's our public land survey system, township range section. So surveyors, when they went out in the early 1800s and started laying down, identifying these townships and range and sections, they kept survey notes, and they made note of all the different locations of the wetlands and the streams, and they commented on what the soils were they good for agriculture. They commented on the timber resources that are there, and they marked witness trees, and they took diameters of these trees. They identified different areas that had been burned, and wind throws and beaver floodings, and they also identified cultural features that were Native American related or early settlers. So they made all that information, put it on paper, and that information is available today. Back about 20 years ago, the state and the Michigan Natural Features Inventory actually started, took that original survey data and started to create maps out of it. Here's a copy of one of the old maps that was used, and the surveyor notes are transcribed onto this. For example, here's a sample section, like 640 acres. And as the surveyors laid these lines down, they actually took notes and made notes of all the features that they run across. And this map says surface undulating, soil good, timber, beech, sugar maple, hemlock. So they made all kinds of information, notes about the different forest types that are out there, the different types of trees that are there. And then here's a kind of a sample of the notes that they took. As they traversed along a section line, they'd identify this is, for example, the distance along that line, 31 chains along the line, they enter the grass and willow marsh. And they continue on at 42 chains, they enter tamarack and spruce. So all that information was transcribed into maps, and ecologists across the state about 20 years ago started to try to map that information. So using all that detailed information, they're able to come up with mapped data, and they call it the pre-settlement vegetation data. And it identifies the different forests and wetlands, special barrens and prairies, and where those were at one time. All these things were identified. And that data was put into a geographic information system, and the data is available to use as you see fit. And I made up this map of the 3-county area in West Michigan that I work, the pre-settlement vegetation types prior to European settlement. And we'll just take a look at some of these, the darker green here. Those are referred to as beech, sugar maple, hemlock forests. And we're going to talk more about those forests tonight. They're one of the most predominant forest types in this 3-county area. And followed by that, if you look, you notice there's a lot of pinkish areas. Those are white pine, white oak forests. A lot of pine and oak forest, especially white oak in those areas. The purple areas are white pine, mixed hardwoods, less oak in those areas. And then if over in Newaygo County, you notice there's some kind of unique forest types. There's actually some different cover types. There's the grasslands and prairies in Newaygo. And typically surrounding those prairies, there are barren lands. Barrens are usually lightly forested, very park-like, mostly open but scattered trees. We had a lot of oak barrens, pine barrens, and oak pine barrens combined. And then some of the lighter blue here, then of course there's wet forested areas, mixed hardwood swamps. But that's the data that suggests, if you'll take a look at that, how forested it is and how the different forests there were. And it gives us a good snapshot of how things were prior to this area was developed. And just to compare that with today's landscape, this is the land cover as it exists roughly today. The green areas are the forested lands. The brown areas are the agricultural lands. And as you can see, the agricultural lands are quite extensive, have made a significant impact on the amount of forest resources in these 3 counties. The green areas mostly are deciduous forests. The darker greens are more coniferous type forests. If you're not familiar with Newaygo County, there's a large portion of Newaygo County that's forested, and a lot of that is part of the Manistee National Forest. There's also some Manistee National Forest that comes into Oceana County, and I think a little bit into Muskegon County as well. But the agricultural lands certainly have an impact on the amount of forest lands. And this table shows just how many trees and different kinds of trees that are in the state. The state and the U.S. Forest Service actually do statewide inventory using sample plots, and are able to extract from that sampling just how many trees there are in Michigan. And based on this inventory, this suggested that there's about 2.5 billion trees in the state. The vast majority, if you look at the chart here, are maples, sugar maple, red maple. About 37% of the 2.5 billion trees are maple trees. Next on the list, northern white cedar, that makes up about 18%. We have some northern white cedar around here, but most of it's to the north. Pines, red and white, about 13% of the state, the trees. Aspen is quite large, about 12% of all the trees are aspen related trees. Oak, we have a lot of oak forests. This suggests that about 4% of the forests are red oak. I noticed it didn't have on here white oak on their list, but I think that would extend the 4% up a little bit higher. But overall, across the state, the maples, cedar, pines, aspen, and oak would be our top trees that would grow in the state. The kind of mention something that's kind of unique to our area. This map is showing the forest habitat regions that are available in the state. Everybody's aware of the southern lower peninsula, and there's referred to as the southern region and the northern region of the lower peninsula, the east and western regions of the upper peninsula. But in between the northern and the southern regions, there's an area that we call the floristic tension zone, or the transition zone. And this is an area where our northern vegetation identifies where the southern limits of our northern vegetation is, and the northern limits of our southern vegetation is. So in this red area, those two zones kind of meet, and they kind of, it makes things interesting down here in this transition zone area, where forest types from the south are seen and forest types from the north are seen, and they kind of blend. So it makes it interesting. Sometimes you might find things that are unusual when you're out in the woods and not expecting it. Expecting that certain type of plant or a certain type of tree to be there. So that keeps things interesting for me when I'm out in the woods. Sometimes things just don't fit. So most of this presentation, we're just going to go through a couple of the more predominant forest types that they're in the West Michigan area, and we'll just kind of start out with a little warning about forest types. It's from the Field Guide to Natural Communities. This is a quote out of the book. The division of the natural world into discrete categories is inherently an artificial process and a matter of human convenience and a subject to human bias. So just kind of a warning. It's not always easy to put what we see out in the woods into a category that fits into. There's a couple other documents that if you're interested in knowing more about communities in Michigan, these are the 3 top field guides that I've used. So tonight I'd like to go through some of these these forest types that are identified in yellow. We're going to go through here and we'll just talk about some of the vegetation that you would expect to find in these types of forests. And the first one we'll start out with is the northern mesic hardwoods forest, kind of more commonly thought of as the beech maple forest. Sometimes it's referred to as the hemlock hardwoods forest. But it's kind of the northern mesic hardwoods, the beech maple hardwoods of the north, are very common across the state, one of the top forest types, I would guess. And the signature trees that you would expect to find in these forests are the sugar maples, the beech, hemlock, red oak, basswood, yellow birch, other trees, a variety of trees, quite a few species you can expect to find, kind of the most diverse forest type in the state. And from a timber perspective, many of the species that we find in these forests are very high value. And just kind of a note, we won't talk about the southern mesic hardwoods or the beech maple forest of the south. Those are kind of south of the transition zone, but its signature trees are also the sugar maple and the American beech. But you'll see mixed in to the southern mesic hardwoods some oaks and some walnut and hickory that you'd find more commonly to the south, the bur oaks and chinkapin oaks, hickory, bitternut hickory, tulip poplar. So there's kind of 2 versions of beech maple, a northern version, a southern version. And to start off, we'll be talking about the beech maple forest of the north. We'll be talking about different trees in the canopy, often the tallest mature trees, the signature trees that, as we mentioned, you expect to find, and we'll just kind of go through the vegetation that you would find in this forest. The sugar maple tree is a highly shade tolerant tree, slow growing and typically very long lived, maybe 200 to 400 years old. The leaves are typically 5 lobed. If you're not aware, you count, this is 1 lobe, 2 lobe, 3 lobe, 4 lobe, 5 lobes. They're opposite on the branch, and have to mention right now that trees, branching patterns on trees are either opposite or alternate. There's only a few that are opposite, and there's an acronym called MAD HORSE that we use for the maple, ash, and the dogwood. Those are trees that have opposite branching, and also the horse chestnut. And then most other trees have alternate branching. The wood of sugar maple is very heavy, hard, and strong, and it's a major high value timber tree. Obviously, sugar maples produce a lot of maple syrup, and Michigan is about fifth in the nation in maple syrup production. The bark is quite unique. It's dark gray, deeply furrowed, has these vertical strips They kind of curl as the tree ages, they get larger and more curly. That's a very dominant tree in the beech maple forest. The American beech is also a very shade tolerant tree, slow growing, very long lived, could be 300 to 400 years old. The leaves are alternate and they're simple and they're oblong, have a kind of coarsely toothed. You don't see it very well in this picture, but the wood is very hard and strong, but it's difficult to season, and it really doesn't have a lot of value as far as a timber product here in West Michigan. In the past, they were actually more valuable in the past. The bark is very smooth and very gray, and it has very long pointed buds, are very typical of, very noticeable on a birch tree. Would expect to find eastern hemlock here in these forests. They're very, very shade tolerant, very slow growing, and very long lived. They can live up to 600 plus years. They have a very small seed, about 3/4 of an inch, and their coniferous needles are what we refer to as two-ranked. If you look at them straight on, you'll see there's kind of 2 layers. The wood is very light and soft and brittle, and it really doesn't have a lot of market value here in West Michigan. The bark itself is very broad, flat topped, has very large ridges. And in the past, they used to use tannins from the bark to tan leather. A very, very fire resistant tree. And red oaks, northern red oaks. They're referred to as an intermediate in shade tolerance. Means they can't take dense shade, but they don't need a lot of light. They can still utilize just a moderate amount of light. They're relatively fast growing and they're very long lived. They can grow to be over 300 years old. The leaves are alternate and simple, and there's typically 5 to 11 lobes. If you count on this leaf here, this is 1, 2, 3, this is 4, 5, 6, 7 lobes here. And they even have lobes, leaves with larger amount of lobes. It's hard to count here, but there's about 9 lobes here. So that varies a little bit in red oak. The wood is heavy and hard and strong, has a very high timber value. The bark has long, broad, flat, smooth topped ridges, and we refer to these as ski trails, long gray areas you'll see on the bark of a red oak. And the petioles are often red, as you can see here. The basswood trees, also pretty common, very common in this forest type. They're very shade tolerant, moderately slow growing, and fairly long lived. They have a simple alternate leaf. Often find the heart-shaped leaf, and they often at the base of the leaf, it's kind of flat and makes unequal lobes. The fruit is kind of interesting. It's kind of pea-like. It's like a little pea, and it's very hard. Turkeys, deer really like it. They also have very fragrant flowers, and as far as attracting bees, it's a very important pollinator tree for wild bees. The wood of this tree is very light and soft, and it's often used in Michigan for there's a plant up by Grayling that actually takes and utilizes basswood strictly to create window shade blinds. There's a brand called Bali that I've seen in the stores that they make, and they use basswood from Michigan. So it's an excellent soft wood. It's excellent for carving. The bark is quite black and grayish and long strips. And also you would expect to see yellow birch trees. Those are intermediate in shade tolerance, moderately growing, fast growing, and they're fairly long lived. They're alternate and simple leaves. And if you notice off of the branch, there's actually the leaves come in pairs. It helps you identify the fact that it's a yellow birch. And it's a fairly high value wood. The bark is smooth and shiny when it's not furled like this. This exfoliation is kind of variable. Sometimes you see a lot on a tree and sometimes you don't see it much at all. And you have to kind of go by the color, kind of a white, gray, yellowish color. The twigs and the leaves and the buds kind of smell like wintergreen if you're able to smell them. And also the yellow birch has got an interesting growth condition. It's called a stilt root. Oftentimes yellow birch and a couple other trees like hemlocks require they use what we refer to as a nurse stump. This right here was an old stump at one time. The seed fell on, the yellow birch seed fell on that tree. Tree started to grow and the stump kind of faded away and it left this stilt root pattern. So when you see that, I'll see that sometimes, and you know that the forested area that you're dealing with is fairly stable and fairly old. Now I'll go through a couple of smaller trees that are kind of less common, but are found in the beech maple forest. Red maple, pretty common, very shade tolerant to intermediate tolerance. It's moderately fast growing and moderately long lived. It's a vigorous sprouter when it's cut. It'll actually sprout from the branch, from the stump and grow into a multi-stem tree. The leaves are 5-lobed and they have lots of fine tooths along the serrated edge. Wood is heavy, but it's not real strong. It's a kind of a moderate value tree species. And you'll notice sometimes you'll see bark of the red maple that looks like this. These are referred to as target canker or bullseye canker. It's a fungus that actually kind of impacts the growth of the inner bark here. And it makes these little patterns. It really does not do a lot of damage to the tree, but it makes the tree look quite unusual, bark. Another common associate is the white ash. It's a moderate in shade tolerance. It's fast growing and moderately long lived. This is one of the opposite branching leaf patterns on a tree versus alternate. And it has a compound leaf, meaning that this entire structure is the leaf, and these little parts of the leaf are the leaflets. And typically they have 7 to 9 leaflets on a white ash. It's also a very high value tree. And the samaras that grow on it, very long. I kind of think they almost look like a bat, which because the white ash wood was used extensively for bats in the past. However, because of the loss of a lot of our ash resources, bats are being made out of hard maples now. The black cherry tree, this is a very intolerant to shade. It's fairly fast growing and can be long lived, 150 to 200 years. Alternate simple leaves. They're very narrow and sharp pointed. The wood is heavy and hard and very beautiful. Veneer woods are from black cherry are extremely beautiful, rich color. The bark is quite unique, blackish, flaky, almost like burnt potato chips. And it has red fruits which aren't shown here, but these are the flowers and they will turn into little red fruits. The birds really like that. And if you have a chance to look at it closely at a black cherry leaf, if you flip it over and look at the midriff down at the bottom there, you'll start to see kind of brown, brown hairy fluff here along the bottom of the leaf midriff. That's a good indication of black cherry. Paper birch. Everybody notices that from the nice white bark that exfoliates somewhat. This is a very shade intolerant, fast growing, very short lived tree. As far as the birches go, this is the leaf is on a single solitary stem. The bark is thin and white. It's a boreal forest tree that you find all the way up into the Arctic areas. And its southern limit is in Michigan, pretty much. And aspen trees, you'll see these in here. There's a couple of them that are common. Big tooth aspen has large toothed edges versus the trembling aspen, very white bark and trembling aspen, a little bit lighter, a little bit yellower looking as the trees get older. These are very shade intolerant, fast growing, short-lived trees. And of course, we find white pines, and especially in the northern portions of the beech maple forest. White pines are moderately shade tolerant, moderately fast growing and long-lived species up to 400 years old. The needles come in bundles of 5. If you look closely, there's 5 needles in a bundle. It's fairly soft and weak wood. It does not have a big timber market here in West Michigan, but it is very, very workable, nice wood. The Amish like to use it. And the white pine too is typically one of the tallest trees that you would find in Michigan. It's not uncommon to find trees up to 150 feet tall. More commonly here in West Michigan, might be 100 to 120 feet tall. And if you're interested in finding finding old growth white pine, good place to look. If you're not aware of it, the Hartwick Pine State Park has one of the largest old growth white pine groves left in the state. And also you would find white cedar. Not common, but will see on occasion more in wetter areas. This is a very shade tolerant tree, very slow growing, very long lived. The bark is very unique, light, shredded, very thin strips. And you often find it in dense, pure stands. When you do see it, it provides a lot of great cover for deer in the wintertime, and plus the deers love to browse on northern white cedar. And just a quick note that the forest canopy of our northern Michigan hardwoods are home to lots of songbirds that migrate to Michigan. These are just a sampling of birds that depend on the dense forest canopy of a beech maple forest that are quite common in our woods. I want to mention a couple of trees that are in the mid-story. They don't grow very tall. They're typically 6 to 30 feet. Sometimes they get a little bigger than that, but trees and shrubs are kind of part of the mid-story. And there's 2 that I want to mention here. One is called the hop hornbeam or ironwood. It's also known by. It's very shade tolerant, very slow growing, moderately long lived. The leaves are alternate and simple, and they have this very unique kind of a of a nutlet and a bract where their seeds are stored. When you see this type of tree, it's a very indication that there's good soil nutrients availability there. So you'd expect to find these in the understory. This is an example of one that's got a very unique branching pattern. Looks like something you would see in a Harry Potter movie, I think. But the bark is very unique too, shredding and long strips, very light colored. And there's something that they call the American hornbeam or musclewood. It gets the name musclewood if you look at the bark. It's very grayish and kind of a muscly looking. It is also highly shade tolerant, slow growing and short lived. It has a heavy, hard and tough, strong wood, and they make tool handles out of this and the hop hornbeam. It also has a little nut and a little bract-like leaf. We often find this too in more poorly drained areas and wetter areas. In the understory in a beech maple forest, typically you would find a variety of saplings and shrubs and herbaceous vegetation. I'm going to go through a few of the shrubs that are more common. It certainly isn't all the shrubs, and I won't have time to go through all those, but just some of the more common ones. The alternate leaf dogwood, very showy white flower, has little purplish droops. The rubus species, the blackberries and the raspberries have this edible, soft, edible mast that's available for mammals and deer and songbirds. The prickly gooseberry, another little shrub, very velvety looking leaves. Yeah, very, they have a little prickles on them, on the little fruits of it. One thing about the prickly gooseberry is that it is an alternate host for a rust fungus that causes what's called the white pine blister rust, which can be very deadly to the white pine trees. So this is down on the bottom here is a leaf, and the back of the leaf shows some of the rust fungus is attached to the leaf. Maple leaf viburnums, very showy, pretty flower, nice, deep, rich, purple-black droop. Wildlife love this. It provides good nesting cover and escape cover for a variety of mammals and songbirds. The beaked hazelnut, more of a northern species, but it has a unique beak-shaped nut seed pod. And of course, the spring ephemeral wildflowers and the beech maple forest is where we find the most usually the most abundant, most showy of our ground covers. The spring ephemeral wildflowers, ephemeral meaning these are short life cycle flowers. They have to green up, grow their leaves, grow their stalks, develop their blooms, produce their seeds in a matter of weeks, while the spring is starting to warm up and the leaves are starting to leaf out. They need to go through this process and get the life cycle done very quickly before the leaves start to shade out the understory. Unfortunately, they're very common, but unfortunately, deer also like a lot of our spring ephemeral wildflowers, and they have a major impact on the population of spring wildflowers. Here's a common one that we see, trilliums. They often grow in large colonies like this, but they're also very, deer are very interested in them, and the deer like to browse them heavily. And there are also some a little further to the north here. We have some red trilliums also that are growing these forests. And another big colony, a wildflower colony, is a Mayapple. And you often see these quite abundantly, and they're not desired by deer, so they'll seem to be quite abundant in many of our forests and the beech maple forests. And you can see a very nice, delicate, a little white flower in the leaf axils here. So that was the beech maple forest. And the other major type that we see typically in West Michigan is the northern dry mesic oak forest, where the oaks are predominantly the signature species. And it has a few other pines and some of the other hardwoods mixed in. So typically the tallest canopy tree, the dominant codominant trees are the signature trees are the red oak. We've already mentioned that one. You'll find these commonly. And you'll find a white oak. And white oaks, if you notice the leaves on the white oaks, they have a rounded lobe versus a red oaks got more sharp lobes, rounded lobes. The acorns are elongate and very highly desired by wildlife. Deer, turkey really like white oak acorns. Oftentimes you'll see the bark is very light colored, whitish almost in places, long strips. And also notice some areas that get kind of flat and very smooth looking. That's caused by a fungus. It's called smooth patch fungus, and it consumes the outer layers of the bark and it makes that flatness, but it does not actually do any harm to the tree. And also there's the black oak. They're actually pretty shade intolerant, and they're fast growing and moderate long lived. Typically 5 to 7 lobes. There's a leaf with 5 or 7 lobes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Versus a northern red oak, which would be 5 to 7 to even more, 11. The wood on this is very hard, strong, typically when a large log, a black oak, you'll often find rot in the middle, a lot of hot rot. When you see black oak, you know the things are kind of on the drier side, kind of a good indicator of drier site conditions. And this is kind of just in the comparison, the 3 major oaks and their acorns that you would find. The red oaks, you notice the caps are very small. Much of the acorn is showing. The white oaks are more elongate, and the black oaks, the caps cover more of the acorn, and they're actually kind of fringed. If you can see in here, there's a little bit of fringe on them. Some of the less common associates that you would find in these oak forests would include the white pine also. We've already talked about them. Red pine, you might find some red pine mixed in. There's usually 2 needles in a bundle on a red pine. And if you take a needle and pinch it and snap it, it'll actually snap and break, versus many of the other pines will just kind of they won't break, they'll just bend and flex back. That's a good indication of a red pine. And you notice the bark is kind of flaky and red. Jack pine, another pine, is kind of a drier site pine. It's very shade intolerant, fast growing. Its needles are in clusters of 2, and they're very twisted and short and stout. It's common on the more nutrient poor acid soils. It's home to the Kirkland's warbler in northern Michigan, to the breeding grounds. We'll find black cherry in these oak forests, red maples in these oak forests, Red maple is a generalist. You find it across many different ecological areas. The aspen also as part of this forest, and hemlock. Understory, there's an interesting shrub, the American hazelnut, very unique little nutlet. Witch hazel also has an interesting little nutlet here. It has this kind of a multi-stem growth pattern. You'll see many stems growing out of it. And what's really interesting about witch hazel is that it flowers. It has these little yellow strappy flowers that you see growing, and they actually bloom in the fall. And there's a large shrub kind of growing in the open, but it's kind of very unique. And this is the actual yellowing leaves that are making that, not the actual flower. You would find flowering dogwood in our oak forests often. They have a very nice white flower. The gray dogwood, also a very nice white flower. They have little white drupes, and they'll often leave these little, once the drupes fall off, they leave these little red stalks all over the bush. Good indication of gray dogwood. Low sweet blueberry, you would find that. These are edible, really delicate plant, nice little blueberries, delicate little white flowers. Wintergreen we will find on the forest floor often. These leaves are very aromatic and flavorful, tasting like wintergreen. Partridge berry has little tiny berries, really delicate fringed white flowers. And columbine. You see these in our garden, but they're garden types, and there's also, this is a native plant of Michigan. This is one of the few plants that are actually pollinated by hummingbirds in Michigan. And some, just a couple of plants that are very special and very unique to the understory. This is something called squaw root. There's no chlorophyll in the plant. They're saprophytic. They actually grow, and they require red oaks to be growing, and they will grow off the red oak roots and form these little very unique plant structures. There's something called the beech drops. Also, no chlorophyll, and they're saprophytic, and they required American beech roots to grow. And there's something called the Indian pipe. Also, no chlorophyll. They are parasitic on mycorrhizal fungi. So basically, they grow on the mycorrhizal fungi that grows it's scattered throughout the forest and intertwined with the forest root system. And they actually grow off of those mycorrhizal fungi, and the fungi actually get their energy from the trees. So they're actually growing off energy of the trees, not using the sun, not using sunlight. And a kind of interesting little evergreen form called the ground pine. So a very unique ground plant. And one other type I'd like to mention, the northern dry mesic pine forest. Signature trees are the white pines, with a variety of other pines and hardwoods, very similar to the northern dry mesic oak forest, but there's more pine in this. And these pines were harvested extensively during the white pine era. This forest type was where a lot of the white and red pine that was logged in the white pine eras in the 1800s. If you look at this photograph, you'll see most all of these trees here are conifers, either white or red pine. These are forests where historically these huge white pine that were scattered across the state. were harvested and put on these large sleds and moved off to the sawmills. And there's I run across this quite often. I see the relics of these old white pine forests. We're looking at there's some stumps here. There's 3 stumps in this photograph here. And here's one in the foreground. These are old relic stumps way back from the 1800s, identifying where a white pine once grew. And here's another impressive one. Very large. You can see all the different erosion that has occurred, and at least 3 feet of sand has blown out from underneath this large old root structure. And in the background, right next to this old stump, is about a 20-inch white pine growing today. And one other quick mention, the aspen birch forest made up mostly of our aspens, but also has balsam poplar in it and cottonwood. The aspens we've mentioned, balsam poplar, another type of poplar that can be growing in the aspen forests, cottonwood also. And there's a picture of Padno. This is actually a forest in Utah, but aspen regenerate with root suckers. They actually clone themselves. And there's a patch in the Fish Lake National Forest in Utah of over 100 acres that actually belongs to one genetic tree. The entire 100 acres are genetically the same. It's one individual that's one of the largest, most massive living organism on Earth. And our aspen forests are really important to the young forests, are really important to game birds, to deer, the ruffed grouse in particular, overwinter and breed in this dense forest, young forest cover. And just a quick mention, this is probably something we can discuss at another webinar, but our forests are under attack. We have numerous problems with oak wilt, hemlock woolly adelgid, beech bark disease, emerald ash borer. They're all these issues are going on in West Michigan here that have an impact on our forest resources. And there's a couple of ones that are another issues that are kind of bothersome, the spotted lanternfly and the Asian longhorn beetle. They are not in Michigan at this time, and we hope they don't show up in Michigan. We're always looking for them, and we certainly don't hope to have those in Michigan anytime soon. And with that, I think that is all that I have to present right now.
If any of you
Can I want to take some questions, Tanya?
Sure. How about if you maybe stop sharing and then we can,
Okay.
that will be good. Very, very informative. Let's see.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. Yes. And you know what? I am, let me see. Maybe now typically with this many people, I would have people, provide their question in chat. If you're willing, we could just have you kind of raise your hand and have your question, or you can put it. Why don't we start out with it in chat? And I did see a comment in the chat, a very good presentation, and I have to agree, very, very interesting and very, very knowledgeable presentation. It's always good to hear the history of our natural resources as well. Let me see if there was one in the chat. We might be able to open it up a little bit. Uh, okay. Okay. So we've got Kat, who says, when you say trees are more or less valuable, what do you mean?
Yeah, I'm usually talking about the timber, from a timber perspective. Some of our tree species are much less valuable than others. So that's kind of what I often refer to. It's based on its timber value. Our higher value trees like northern red oak, hard maples, versus some of the lower value trees like basswood, aspen, things
So,
like that.
so mainly human use.
Yeah, I'm talking about human use. Yep.
Okay. We have another question. Let me see. What is a witness tree from Margot?
What is a witness tree? Yeah, they actually set up witness trees when they were identifying the section lines. They would establish a section line or a section corner, and they would actually, from that corner, would identify a witness tree, and they'd measure the distance to it, and they'd measure the direction to it, and they'd write that down and say white oak at 90 degrees, 100 feet away, and that'd help them establish where the locations of the section corners are.
Okay. And from Charles, do you know of anywhere that a savanna has been restored when there was not existing canopy?
You say that again?
Do you know of anywhere that a savanna has been restored when there was not an existing canopy?
No, but I do know there's a lot of restoration of savannas and barrens over in Nuevo County. The U.S. Forest Service, the Manistee National Forest has done lots of restorations on existing barrens. Oftentimes the problem is the barrens they're very fire dependent, and they due to the lack of fire, they start to fill in with lots of different trees and become clogged with numerous trees when they're not supposed to have that many trees, just because they don't have fire anymore.
Okay. Do you, and I think in the Whitehall area, we were looking to establish an oak savanna, right? Are you familiar with that, Rod? It's now the Howmet property on Benston Road.
No, but
Okay, that was it. That was the intention. Although I think Howmet did not want the burning, which was needed. So,
oh yeah, it's pretty required to at least get it started. Yeah, yep.
so but I can't say for sure. Okay, it says from Ruth Carson, on your picture of the basswood, there are straight lines of holes in the wood. Are those due to insect borers?
No, actually, those I should have mentioned. Those are from woodpeckers, sapsuckers. Yellow-bellied sapsucker causes those horizontal lines across the tree like that.
And
It's a woodpecker that does that.
from, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Renate, is there a way to treat the hemlock woolly adelgid?
Is there a way to treat it?
Yes.
Yes. Hemlock woolly adelgid, yes, there is. Typically what we're doing right now are injecting trees that are impacted by hemlock woolly adelgid. We're actually injecting insecticide into the trees. Trees will transport it up into the leaves. The insects will tap into the leaves and get the insecticide and die. And we're actually trying to managing the hemlock woolly adelgid issue that's going on right now along the coast of Michigan here.
In fact, I think I was at Hoffmaster when I saw a team out there.
Yeah, all the state parks have been doing that. There's a very extended program going on where we're trying to identify where the trees are impacted, and starting to do that right now. In fact, the winter time is the best time to identify where the insects are, and then come springtime, they'll start treating with insecticide again.
Okay, this is from Lori Coleman. She said, I've read that birch are endangered because of climate change. Can you explain?
What did you say, birch tree?
Birch are endangered because of climate change.
Birch? Well, they're a northern species, and I think as the temperatures rise and the impact to the northern species, that will definitely, cause stress on them as the temperature continues to warm.
And from Robert, he says at the beginning, there was a slide that showed the total number of trees in Michigan. Does that include city trees?
I'm not certain, but the intent of that data is to kind of get a grasp on just how many and what kind of trees are the most common in the state. So I would think it would be in that number, but realizing the number of trees in our urban areas versus our wildland areas is, quite a big difference.
And then Carol, what about swamp trees, cedar and tamarack?
Yes, I didn't mention much about those because I'm not in those woods very often, but we certainly have lowland hardwoods, lowland conifers near our streams, very common, cedars, tamarack, and some of the oak, for example, silver maple. I didn't mention that. That's more of a lowland hardwood species.
And from ED, is there any hope for the dying beech trees? The ones around me are suffering with white bark disease.
Yeah, that's beech bark disease. That's what you're referring to, and we are seeing the evidence of the beech scale that's on the bark. It causes that white on the bark. That is beech scale. Fortunately, the beech scale and the beech bark disease is caused by a fungus that comes after the beech scale. It's a very slow acting, but landscape wide, it's going to be difficult to stop it. I see it now doing lots of damage to our beech trees, especially in Oceana County, and I do see the scale in other places too. But from a landscape perspective, there's not much we can do.
I have a question from Janet. She says, I have a property where there's a monoculture of planted pines that are dead or almost dead. Do you have suggestions for replanting or removal?
Yeah, I see that quite often. A lot of times people do plant red pines, especially into plantations, and they're planted very densely and they're not managed at all. And after 30, 40 years of dense growing, they start to become stressed. Insect and disease will start to impact their population. They'll start to fall apart, start to die. The best thing to do is when you have a plantation, is to manage the plantation and keep it thinned and keep it growing nice. When you start to see trees starting to die, it's time to either cut it down and start over, really.
So, do you have suggestions for replanting, removal? She said oaks are common here and the soil is mainly sand.
Yeah, you could plant some oaks, red pine, white pine. That's what they did a lot with the drier, droughty sites, especially they put a lot of red pine on them.
Okay, I'm trying to get to the questions, but my chat box is jumping around a little bit, so my apologies. This is from Nathan. What are your thoughts on using agroforestry management techniques like alley cropping and silvopasture in existing forests?
Well, I've heard of that, and I have not been involved much in silvopasture. I haven't had that opportunity, and I think that's a practice that's not common in Michigan, but in other places it is more common.
I have another question from Kat. Are all the trees you mentioned native to Michigan, and are there any that are fast growing and also long living?
Yeah, all the trees that I spoke about are all native Michigan trees. Are some long living, fast growing and long living. That's a hard combination to find. Most of them are fast growing and short living. If you're looking for a fast growing tree, I think red maple is kind of moderate in both. Fairly fast growing, fairly long lived.
I have a question from, let me see, Sam, what about Norway maples? They seem to be hybridizing and moving out of landscaped areas.
Yeah, that's true, and they're not a native tree, the Norway spruce. Did you say spruce or maple?
Norway maples.
Oh, a Norway maple, yeah. They're not native, and they are spreading into, especially near urban areas where they spread into the kind of urban forested areas. Yeah, I don't know what we can do about them besides remove them.
Should we have them cut down when we see them? I mean, not in somebody's yard, of course, but
Like in your woods,
yeah.
it wouldn't hurt. And if you're talking a great many, it might be kind of expensive to do, but if it's just one, you can take it out and eliminate the seed source so it doesn't continue to spread.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And we have from, and if I'm going too fast and you need a follow-up, just go ahead and jump in, okay? From Carol, what about the jack pine plantations that were planted all over the west part of the state, starting with the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, and then the school FFA planted? And Carol says, they are so ugly and lined up with lines.
Yeah, they grew them all. They planted white pine, jack pine and red pine everywhere. They thought that they had to cover up all the dry, sandy, low sand areas with something, and so they planted these plantations everywhere. I'd as soon remove them if they're in a droughty, sandy area, and let the native vegetation take over.
A good example of that, if anybody knows Clear Springs Nature Preserve, a little bit north of Montague, a little west of Fruitvale. It's a lovely nature preserve, but it does have pines that were planted by the Civilian Conservation Corps, and it's just fascinating to see the big rows. From Ross, is the northern mesic forest the same as the beech maple climax forest, which I've heard
Yes.
before? Okay.
Yes, that's what I did kind of mention. It's the beech maple forest, and it's the hemlock hardwood forest. It has a couple of different names.
Okay, I don't have any more questions
Can I
unless.
follow up on that? So if that's basically the standard, Rod, do you have any recommendations for management of that type of forest?
Of what kind?
Of the northern mesic forest?
Oh, the typical management. Typically, when we're setting up silvicultural prescriptions for forests like that, we recommend single tree and group tree selection, depending on what kind of species are there. But that's the typical way to manage it, is a single tree selection. We go in and select some of the less value, poorly growing trees as a single tree and take those out. We try to keep it mostly forested, not a lot of impact on the openings, canopy openings, to keep it climax.
And we've got, Carol wanted to know if willows were native.
Yes, there's many willows that are native. There's many species of native willows in Michigan. Black willow is kind of one of the more common ones that you see in near rivers and streams, but there's sandbar willow. There's many species I don't even know how to identify.
And Mark says, I remember a few years ago, there was a move to eliminate the concept of biodiversity in the management of tree harvesting and management based on landowners' property. So Casperson, a UP senator and logger, was advocating this. Do you remember that, Rod?
No, but I wouldn't, I'd always recommend it when I'm working with landowners to maintain their biodiversity, not to eliminate it.
Yeah, they didn't want to actually use the concept of biodiversity in management. I remembered that.
No.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Are maples and white pines fairly safe from disease? That's Ross.
White pine
White pines and maples.
and maple, white pine, pretty much. White pine blister rust is an issue, but it's not significant. I mean, I haven't seen it very significant. White pine is it does pretty well. There's not a lot. It does have its natural enemies, but I don't see a lot of issues with it. Maple, nothing that's real eminent right now. However, we are concerned about the Asian longhorn beetle, one of the primary hosts of the Asian longhorn beetle are maples, and we have a lot of maples. So we hope we never see that in Michigan. That's being heavily managed wherever it's found. It's been found out east, been found actually as close to as Ohio. But so far it's not in Michigan. It's a non-native insect that causes that.
I've got a question from Jeremy that I don't quite understand, but maybe quickly let's do one from Margot. She wondered about autumn olive.
Yeah, I see a lot of autumn olive. It's a non-native invasive shrub that's been planted. It was recommended to be planted as a wildlife tree back in the 60s and 70s. It's pretty common. But now we have issues with it spreading throughout some people's forests, throughout their fields. It's a big issue. We try to recommend that it be removed whenever possible. It's a battle though when that has to happen.
Jeremy, I'm not sure I understand your question about pine cones. Would you want to just bring that up yourself? Where's Jeremy? You can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jeremy. Sorry, no, I was just saying, do you guys think it's like okay to bring pine cones and like leaves home with me if I'm not taking like a lot, just because I think they're cool?
No, it's not a problem, typically. Unless it's
Nice.
some kind of rare pine tree or something.
I don't know. It was a pretty cool one, but I don't think it might have been too rare.
No. If you found it in Michigan, are you bringing it from elsewhere? Like,
Oh yeah, over by have you ever been to Nordhaus Dunes? Yeah, beautiful. I was just camping out there this summer and took a pine cone home with me. Sorry, this is probably a really silly question. You guys can move on.
Well, I used to say there's no stupid question. I don't say that anymore, but just the times that we're in, sorry. But Julie wants to know, do you make house calls, and then we're gonna need to wrap up.
Do I make house calls? What do you mean? Do you have a forest?
I think she does, actually.
Yeah, if you're in my
No.
Julie, I'll get you connected to Rod, okay? Because we probably
Okay.
yeah, I'll get you two connected. She probably does have a forest.
Yeah,
Rod.
sure.
Okay.
If you're in my 3 county region, I'll be happy to help you.
Okay, we do need to kind of
All right.
wrap.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody for participating. Thank Rod, absolutely. Let's give him you can unmute and give him a hand. And I do want to let you know that when you register through Eventbrite, we do have your emails, and WMEAC, I would like to keep those and use those for future events. If you get an email from me and you'd rather not be on that list, just let me know and I'll remove you. Same for Rod with this his work, and for John with the tree group. We will send an email out to you occasionally with things, and if that's something you're not interested in, just let us know. And in fact, I will send an email out with the recording of this and also a number of different opportunities, how to get a hold of John and participate in his tree group, and then numerous activities with in the Muskegon Lakeshore. Going forward, we're going to be doing a monthly community conversations on climate change with a number of different topics, from energy efficiency to electric cars to a climate change 101 in January, what you need to know for 2021. Much of my focus of my work is focused on climate change. We're going to get Rod back and hopefully have him do something on climate change in forests and carbon sequestration. I'm going to be pulling together a climate change crash course for people to participate in, to learn about climate change with Dr. Janet Vale, who is on this meeting call tonight. And we just have a lot of educational opportunities and a lot of opportunities to get involved, in particular to focus around nature, to look at how important nature is, and look at highlighting the benefits and the dangers and the opportunities there. So John, did you want to have a few more words?
Danny, you did a very good job of summarizing everything, but I would say I'm really want to thank you and Rod for sort of organizing this, especially Rod for the just excellent presentation. And I learned a lot of things that I didn't know about before tonight, and it's very educational. And that's exactly the kind of thing that our tree group really wants to promote. And we look forward to sponsoring Rod and other people like Rod who might be able to share information and educate our community and make us more aware of the value of trees. And I'd like to learn more. It seemed like there were a lot of questions about the health aspects of trees in all the questions. And that was the one area that Rod was thinking at one time. I know he talked earlier, he wanted to spend a little bit more time on. So that might be another good subject for the future. But I want to thank all of you for coming, all of you attending, and Tanya will be sort of connecting with all of you through that email list. So thanks, Tanya.
Yeah, it may be just a little bit because we need to get the recording and kind of spiff it up a little bit before we get it out to you. But until then, I want to wish you a safe and wonderful holiday, and certainly reach out to me if there are questions that you have, or you have suggestions for topics, whether they're forest or climate change related. And thank you again for participating this evening, and happy holidays.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.